Week 17 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 15 quarterbacks. I'm ranking this week number 1, Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. So what a season it's been for Jalen Hurts. I know the turnovers have been up there, but in terms of fantasy points and just finding the end zone this season, he's been one of the best once again in fantasy football. So Jalen Hurts broke the record last week, most rushing touchdowns in the season, beating Cam Newton. And this week, another cupcake matchup for Hurts versus the Arizona Cardinals, where they're one of the worst defenses in the league traveling to Philly. So once again, I think Hurts goes out there and has a good performance. And when you got offensive weapons like A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert, DeAndre Swift, that's just a great offense, and you're going to put up points weekly. Number 2, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. So Josh Allen, another MVP-type season here for Allen. The last few weeks, his team starting to get things going. I know the numbers dropped off where they're running the football a little bit more, but Josh Allen, we know he's a quarterback that's a dual threat. He can run the football. He's got a knack for the end zone as well, rushing. And this week in a pretty good matchup versus the New England Patriots, where I know their defense is bend but don't break, but they're still vulnerable to giving up points. And I like Allen to go out there, have a nice game this week. Number 3, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. So Lamar Jackson at the top right now of winning that MVP race here. So Lamar, what a game it was for him on Monday night, making some big plays when this Raven team needed it. I know the defense put him in good position, but he still went out there. He put up fantasy points, and he made the big plays. So this week in a potential shootout versus the Miami Dolphins. And we saw last season where these two teams went up and down the field, and the Dolphins came back from 21 and beat this Raven team. I think this time Lamar is going to remember that ball game, and he knows he's just got to keep going out there and put up points on the board. So this week, like I said, potential shootout, good offense around Jackson and his running ability. He's one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy this season. Number 4, Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. It's been tough sledding for Patrick Mahomes, especially the last 3-4 weeks with just bad penalties and a lot of drop passes for this Kansas City offense. And last week, uncharacteristic of Patrick Mahomes, throwing a pick 6, and this offense turning the football over a few times. But this week, I feel like it's a get-right type of situation here for Mahomes in this offense versus the Bengals. We just saw Mason Rudolph go out there and throw for 300 yards in that ball game. So Patrick Mahomes, I know he's not operating with much. Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, the only guys in the offense in the passing game that he can rely on. But still, this week versus Cincinnati, and after coming off a bad loss, usually Mahomes bounces back and has a big ball game. Number 5, Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. So Dak Prescott, last week he did all he can to win that ball game for the Cowboys, but at the end, Dolphins drove down and won on a game-winning field goal. But this week, Cowboys back at home. They've won 12 straight at home, including going back to last season, obviously, and the Lions coming to town, a potential shootout. And Dak Prescott, when you got guys like CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, Tony Pollard, and even Brandon Cooks making some plays here and there over the last month of the season, he's putting up fantasy numbers. And I know he had a bad game a few weeks ago with Dak Prescott in that bad loss for that Cowboy team at the Buffalo Bills. But last week it was a middle-of-the-pack type of ball game. And this week versus Detroit, who does give up yards to quarterbacks and points as well in fantasy, and a potential shootout on Saturday night. I think Dak rights the ship a little bit and has a good game. Number 6, Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers. So this week, an easy matchup with the Washington Commanders. That we saw even Trevor Siemian go out there and be a decent quarterback in that one. So Brock Purdy, I know last week, 4 interceptions. Ravens took advantage, made some big plays, and they made Purdy look like a mid-quarterback last week. But I know Purdy's a good quarterback. I also know it's part of the system. But when you got weapons like Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, and CMC out of the backfield, things definitely get easier. And this week at a weak Commander defense, I think they could hang 40 on them possibly at San Francisco. And Purdy obviously will be a big part of that. Number 7, Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams. So this Ram team, ever since Kyren Williams came off injured reserve with his leg injury, this team's taken off on offense. And Matthew Stafford now, in those good looks, he's making the right reads. And when you have Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Demarcus Robinson thriving in the passing game, and then you got Kyren Williams, a good dual threat running back, one of the better backs in fantasy football this season, making plays. This week in a good matchup, it lines up well for Matthew Stafford at the Giants, where I think he could go in to MetLife Stadium and get his 250, 300 yards possibly, and find the end zone twice. Number 8, Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So what a difference a year makes for Baker Mayfield. Last season, the Panthers cut him loose. They didn't want anything to do with him. And then he went to the Rams as an audition at the end of the year. And obviously they didn't re-sign him. And he went here to the Bucs. So this season, this Buc team in first place. I know the record isn't all that great, 8-7 on the season, but Baker's making plays. Him and Mike Evans has a great rapport. They've been putting up points all year. Rachaad White, one of the best receiving and all-round backs in fantasy football. And Chris Godwin, even the last 2-3 weeks here, starting to emerge. So this week, I know a tougher matchup in the division versus New Orleans Saints, where the division is up for grabs pretty much. If the Bucs win this game, they're going to clinch it. And I think Baker goes out there and has a good game. Number 9, Tua, of the Miami Dolphins. So the last few weeks, he's taken a little bit of a backseat to the run game. And obviously, tougher matchups it's been for Tua as well, going back now, where he had the Dallas Cowboys week, he didn't do much versus them in that ball game. And even a decent New York Jet defense held Tua down for the most part. But this week at Baltimore, he knows he's got to have to put up points. And there's also going to be some turnovers as well, most likely, where this is a ball-hawking defense. And we saw on Monday night, making the 49ers look like a mid to poor offense at best. So this week, I think Tua still could go out there, be a decent fantasy option. But obviously, he dropped down a few spots over the last couple weeks. Number 10, Justin Fields of the Chicago Bears. So Fields went out there and he had a solid game, 27 fantasy points last week with a rushing touchdown, over 70 yards rushing, and about 200 yards passing with the TD. So this week here, middle of the pack matchup versus the Atlanta Falcons, where their defense, believe it or not, has been pretty decent over the last few weeks here. But Justin Fields obviously a better player at home than he is on the road this season. I think he could go out there and help fantasy owners once again. And the Chicago Bear team, number 11, Jared Goff, the Detroit Lions. So the Lions going into Dallas, a potential shootout. But the Cowboys, they've been home warriors this season, undefeated at home. And it's a tough matchup at the Cowboys. They still have a pretty decent defense, I believe. Last week, the Dolphins, they didn't really go rampant up and down the field, only scoring 22 points and settling in that one for 4 field goals. So right now, I think Jared Goff has an opportunity, though, to go out there and have a pretty decent game. And when you got players like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, one of the best tight ends in the league, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery out of the backfield, you got a lot of good players and playmakers that have been helping Goff all season. So this week at Dallas, even in a tough matchup, I think Goff could be a productive quarterback and help owners this week. Number 12, Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. So this Philadelphia defense, believe it or not, one of the worst units in the league. And we even saw Tyrod Taylor coming in relief last week and look pretty decent at the quarterback position. So Kyler Murray, we know he's a dual threat, one of the better running quarterbacks in the league. He's up there with a Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields. And this week at Philadelphia, I think he takes advantage a little bit with him and Trey McBride playing that combo ball game, where they've been a good combination since Murray came off ACL surgery. So right now, I think Murray goes out there. You know what you could get from him, at least 20 fantasy points per week for the most part. And in the Philly defense that's given up tons of yards and points this season, I like Murray as a good option this week. 13, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. So Jordan Love, he's been 20 or plus fantasy points over the last 5 weeks here, and he's got good weapons and young weapons as well. I know guys have been dropping like flies in the receiving room for this Packer team. We saw Jaden Reed miss last week's game. Christian Watson, he's been out majority of the season, and Wicks left as well last week with the chest injury. But guys are stepping up. They're still making plays, and Jordan Love's a good quarterback at extending plays. So this week, Sunday Night Football at Minnesota, indoor game, always a plus instead of being outdoors at a cold and rough Lambeau Field out there. I think Jordan Love, even if he don't have a full arsenal of wide receivers, once again, could go out there and make plays, and Tucker Kraft has stepped up as well. And we know Aaron Jones still one of the better receiving backs out of the backfield. Number 14, C.J. Stroud of the Houston Texans. So this week, a decent matchup versus the Tennessee Titans if C.J. Stroud actually returns in this ball game. But Stroud right now has been a quarterback that has taken the league by storm before. He's missed the last 2 games with a concussion. And obviously, he had a couple hiccups where he didn't perform and have a good game. But this week, in a division matchup versus the Tennessee Titans, if he goes out there and plays, I think C.J. Stroud once again could put up fantasy points. I know Tank Dell was a big hit for this offense, where he got hurt a few weeks ago and out for the season, but still Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, Noah Brown's been decent at the receiver. John Mechie maybe could break out. So there's weapons there. And like I said, this Tennessee team versus wide receivers and quarterbacks this season really haven't done a good job. And the 15th and final quarterback I'm ranking is Derek Carr of the New Orleans Saints. So Derek Carr, it's been an up and down first season for him with this Saints team. And last week he went out there, though, and he had a nice fantasy game. I know it was garbage time a lot with the Los Angeles Rams, but Derek Carr has a nice number 1 wide receiver in Chris Olave. Juwan Johnson starting to get involved in the offense more. And Taysom Hill is taking a lot of goal line touches over the last few weeks, where obviously he's not 100%, and he's been dealing with multiple injuries. I think Derek Carr this week at Tampa Bay in a ball game that this same team knows they need, and this Tampa Bay secondary definitely is a little leaky. He could put up decent numbers, so that's a top 15 quarterback. So I'm ranking for week 17 of the fantasy football season.